All right, everyone. Good evening. If you're watching live, this is Jennifer Davis, and we are on the first day of June. Not the first day, we're on the first continuing education of June. So this month is going to be really focused on things that pop up in the summer. And as I was putting together the topics, I realized I left out bugs, like keeping the bugs off. So we'll probably do a bonus on essential oils and insects and pests and all that kind of stuff. So we'll do that one at another time. But tonight we're going to focus on wound care, and next week we're going to focus on injury, because I felt like if I did both tonight, I'd probably end up going down a bunny trail, and I didn't want to do that. So we're just going to focus on wound care, cuts, bites, stings, that kind of thing. When the skin is opened up, or, if you get hurt, your kids, oh gosh, so far this summer, one of my kids, skinned knees. That kid finally has skin on her kneecaps for the first time in probably a month, and so we were using a lot of oils on her. And actually, I forgot to bring up something I was going to talk about tonight, but that's okay. You'll just have to put the picture in your head as I talk about it. So let's just jump right into this. So it's really interesting because I actually started using oils about 10 years ago, and when I started using them, I was really more interested in using essential oils for wound care specifically, kind of just replacing that first aid kit. And so we all kind of have our thing that before you met myself, or whoever else brought you into our online community, you probably just used essential oils for like one or two things, like cleaning, or like just when you had a headache, or just when you were sick. And so we really teach how to use oils every day to prevent, so your body just functions better. It's just like drinking water and eating proper nutrition. You're just giving your body what it needs. And so essential oils are very much the same. And what I've noticed is that when my kids get hurt, or when we have an injury, because we're using oils regularly every day, our body just responds so much faster. I notice I heal faster. And so that's actually a really important thing I just wanted to point out. So if you find that you do have trouble healing or something, it could be that your body is just deficient in something and it needs a little bit of support. Because you know what? When you give the cells what they need, they're going to be amazing rock star cells. So when I started using essential oils, it was all about wound care. And I remember the very first big wound I had any experience with was my husband, when he got opened up his, like the area right above his eyebrow when he was shooting a gun, and the scope came back and hit him in the face and just opened it up. I mean, there was blood everywhere. And of course, I was, we were out in, we're way down in Missouri in the middle of nowhere, with a family who homesteads anyways. Of course, she had lots of oils, and, the first thing, we both looked at each other and we go, where's our essential oils? I mean, we were just so excited to use them. So we were using, honey, and we were using essential oils and all kinds of stuff. So one thing I just want to point out is that essential oils are really good for the skin. And the skin, so there's all these like responses that happen in our body when we are getting hurt, when we're sick, when we're injured. And so the essential oils just help those responses. They don't force a response. They don't make a response happen. They just support the response. So you're not going to get the same effect with an essential oil like you would if you were to spray on, like a healing spray that's meant to numb. However, we have lots of experience with essential oils helping with discomfort from wounds and just taking the edge off. So that's been really good. I got a lot of you on here, so good evening. Thanks for joining us. Funny thing was I was hoping this would be my first front porch continuing education like I did last summer, but we have a storm rolling in here in Kansas City, so we may get some flashes of lightning here in a little bit. Okay, so let's talk about wounds. What's a wound? We're not going to talk about injuries. We're talking about when you get hurt and the skin opens up. Now, if the skin doesn't open up and you have like a contusion, you can really just use like lavender and cypress, and just you can even use deep blue. That's going to help with the broken capillaries and such. So you can just use those. Now, when the skin is actually ruptured, you run into a lot of new things. You run into possible infection. you run into it getting infected later on because it's now skin that's exposed that's not supposed to be exposed, or I should say inner skin that's not supposed to be exposed. So first thing you're going to do when you have a wound is, well, a couple things. You can wash it out. So when my child fell off her bike and skinned up her knees and there was like gravel in her leg, took her to the bathroom and I was pouring water over it. So I'm one of those moms that don't want to scrub it. I remember as a kid freaking out when I got hurt because I knew mom was going to touch it. And I actually don't do that. I just kept running the water and used the force of the water. It stopped bleeding because of that. And it was the funniest thing. It was the most deep wound that she can remember, because she's got some pretty big doozies, that actually produced what we call weeping, which I'm going to talk about too, what oils are good for that. So she was like, what is this like yellow blood? It was the funniest thing. So I was like, no, that's weeping. And so of course I got out the oils for that. So let's go back to the beginning. So if you've got bleeding, you can add helichrysum to it. Helichrysum is an oil. It doesn't burn. It doesn't sting. You can use it for bleeding. You could put it straight on the wound when the blood is spraying out if you wanted to, but don't wait too long to get some pressure on that. So then you can apply pressure. My husband recently sliced his, I don't remember his thumb or his index, but he sliced it down and I remember blood just sprayed everywhere. Sorry if this is going to be a really gory Facebook Live. Okay, if you're really sensitive in the stomach, you might want to just catch the notes from somebody else. So anyways, I dropped helichrysum on it. He applied pressure because the goal is to get the bleeding to stop. And then you can start applying your oil. So get bleeding to stop. You want to rinse it out, make sure there's no debris in it. Or if you were cut by something that could be infected, like, you know, maybe you're out on the farm and you cut yourself with some barbed wire or something like that. So something that could be infected, then you want to make sure you rinse that off, get any bacteria that's like, woo, let's have a party inside the skin. You want to get that off. So helichrysum to stop bleeding. Now, another thing that you can do is with a, you don't want to use a plastic bowl for this, just like a glass bowl. 1 drop of lavender, 1 drop of melaleuca, and 1 drop of basil to the bowl of water, and then that's the water that you use to clean the wound. So put pressure on, use this water, and that's because the oils that are in that are very effective for things like antibacterial. And so actually I'll talk about those really quick. Okay, so lavender is going to offer mild pain relief. It's also antimicrobial and antibacterial. I was hoping to find like really cool studies for you guys, but honestly the list of antibacterial for lavender is so long. I just really was like, okay, it's way too much information. If you want to know more about that, I'm sure you can find it in the Modern Essentials book, or go to pubmed.gov and look up, you know, lavender antibacterial, and you'll see all those studies. You can also go to aromaticscience.com. That's doTERRA oils used in studies that are pulled from PubMed. So that's kind of an interesting website to use. So melaleuca is antibacterial. It's also very soothing as well. I will say all of my family says that lavender stings a little on really fresh wounds, so just keep that in mind, but it doesn't take very long before that pain starts to diminish because it is meant for reducing those pain receptors. So melaleuca is antibacterial. There's lots of studies on melaleuca and its response to things like MRSA and staph infections. So I always tell people, I mean, even with a bug bite, those, even though at first it seems like it's not a big deal, cut or bug bite, as time goes on, and like the biggest one is bug bites and the bacteria that's underneath fingernails and you're scratching it, or like if the wound just gets dirt on it because it's like rubbing inside your clothes or something like that, you always have that potential because things like MRSA and staph is actually sitting on the outside of our skin. It's like sitting on surfaces, and our skin has bacteria on it that's designed to, you know, prevent our body from having a response to things like staph and MRSA. So by using essential oils, it's just going to help our body respond even more powerfully to those particular strains of really uncomfortable bacterias. Melaleuca is also anti-inflammatory in a very interesting way. So if you've ever heard of something called wheal and flare, what that is it's a response to like a histamine reaction. So if you've ever had an allergy test and they put the dots on the body and you notice the skin kind of like turns into a welt, and the welt has a very specific kind of shelf. So when you have a welt from a bruise or a burn or oh gosh, I'm trying to think one, a bug bite. So you'll notice it's more of a mound. We're looking for a shelf type pattern on the skin, and that lets you know that it's a histamine reaction. A really good example of that is when I get scratched by a cat. So cat scratches do this to me because I'm allergic to cats. And so what happens is I get a cat scratch, and no matter how deep or how surface it is, this happens. It looks like little tunnels that have been buried under my skin because it's like a tunnel thing going on and it has a slight shelf to it. That is called wheal and flare, and Melaleuca helps decrease that response when you have a wound that results in a histamine reaction. So a good example of that is a cat scratch, a dog bite, if you're allergic to that. Or another thing is that these animals, especially outdoor animals who are outside, and like dog bites specifically, let's say your dog is out in the woods and was rubbing up against things like poison ivy, and there's all kinds of things that your animals can get on you because of where they go. And I don't care what anybody says, dogs do not have clean mouths. Maybe cleaner than ours, I don't know, but I would not let an animal lick a wound. Don't do that, okay? Wheal and flare is also something that might happen if you are walking outside and you get stuck on a thorn bush or some sort of tree branch that punctures the skin. That would be a time that maybe you might experience that. So just remember Melaleuca. And then the other one, basil, I mentioned in a bowl of water. So basil is just overall an antibacterial. Actually, you'll find most essential oils are, but basil is also, on a side note, really good for bites or stings that involve venom. And so basil is the one you're going to want to use there. So you can use basil for things like spider bites, hornet stings, bee stings, like something that's got venom in it, snake bites. Although if you get a snake that bites you that has venom in it, you can use your oils, but get to a hospital, okay? Because your oils are, I've heard miraculous stories about this, but I'm just like, just get to a hospital. We're not practicing frontier medicine right now. At least don't tell me about it. So then going back to the taking care of it. So bowl of water, 1 drop lavender, 1 drop Melaleuca, 1 drop basil, and use that to clean the wound. Now you can start using lavender to help with the healing process. And again, the pain. So once the bleeding is stopped, you wash the wound, add your lavender, and then add your Melaleuca again, and that helps fight infection. Now, I just want to remind you, you can totally apply these straight to the wound. Open wounds. I get this all the time. Do I apply it around the wound, open wound? Or, what about stitches? As much as and I will say, if you have a bandage, oils and Band-Aids don't mix, because the sticky part of a Band-Aid starts to come unstuck when you add oils to it. So if you need a bandage because it's not stopping bleeding and you only have Band-Aids with the adhesive, then yeah, use that and then use oils once the bleeding has stopped, because we've ran into that before. We try to use like cloth bandages that are sterile so that I can continue to use essential oils, but the kids don't really like those because it sticks to the skin and then it's uncomfortable to pull off. So you got that in mind. Lemongrass is for if there's ligament damage. So if you cut too deeply and you're concerned about ligament damage, then you can use that. Okay, so other oils that you might want to keep in mind, we have bleeding. We would use helichrysum, rose, lavender, lemon. So most people have lavender and lemon. To disinfect a wound, So I actually have these little glass spray bottles that I use, and in that spray bottle is Melaleuca and lavender. Do you guys see a theme here? Melaleuca and lavender. I could teach probably a whole class on just those two oils. But you can add those two oils with some fractionated coconut oil, or you can just add it straight, and then that way you have an actual spray and you're not having to drop it and you're not having to rub it on with your fingers. So we like to use this little spray bottles. doTERRA actually sells a spray bottle. I don't have one in here. It's about this tall and it's a brown spray bottle. It's actually what TerraShield comes in, and then you can buy them empty. So that would be a good thing to put some sort of antiseptic spray in it with your lavender, your Melaleuca. Another oil, it's the Kids Blend Stronger. That's a disinfectant as well. And then we have thyme oil that can be a disinfectant as well. So thyme would kind of be like a milder version of oregano. And then oils for healing would be basil, helichrysum. Helichrysum actually has the constituents in it that helps with tissue regeneration, so it can help build that tissue back up, so it actually speeds up the healing. Again, the Stronger blend for kids, Melaleuca, lavender, and then we have two oils I haven't talked about, and that's myrrh and sandalwood. So actually I had a note about this. So when you're putting a bandage on, so when changing the bandage, you can apply 1 drop of basil or sandalwood to help promote further healing. And the cool thing about sandalwood is that it actually doesn't have any sensation. It doesn't burn, it doesn't sting, it's not warm, it's not cold. It's just like putting water on your skin, except it's an oil and it's a little thicker than water. And then you can also, we have a blend called Purify. You can also add a drop of Purify or On Guard to protect infection. So when you pull that bandage off and it looks a little angry, you might want to step it up and add some On Guard. Now, what I do with On Guard is I actually apply it to the skin around the wound, because On Guard is very strong and it does kind of hurt. So we actually use the On Guard Touch. And then we apply it around the wound, and then we apply enough so it's kind of like a little drippy, and then we let it kind of go into the spot that it needs to go into. I don't like touching my bottles to wounds, so don't roll it on the wound, and that's really like why I really like the spray bottles, because you can just spray it on, cover it back up, and you're good to go. Okay, so I mentioned weeping. So my daughter got to experience weeping. None of my kids have ever been hurt bad enough to have that, at least not that they remember. And I remember when I was a kid, every time falling off my bike, having that weeping happen afterwards. So the bleeding stops, now it's weeping. What do you do? So myrrh oil, and the cool thing about myrrh is it's really thick and syrupy, so it kind of stays where you put it. And then we have patchouli. Who would have known, right? Patchouli was good for weeping, so that's another good one to keep on hand. All right, so let me see here. Okay, so we talked about lavender, Melaleuca, and basil. Let's talk about frankincense. So frankincense is one of the top 5 oils, and so again, you should have this one on hand. It's anti-inflammatory. It's really good for the skin. It's also good for infected wounds. So again, if you think that you might have a potential infected wound, so, you know, when my husband cut his finger with a knife that he was cutting up, he was cutting up leeks. That's what he was cutting up. So we weren't really worried about infection, but, you know, if he had been using, you know, a knife and cutting, like one of those X-Acto knives that's, you know, been in the garage, you don't know what's on it, like, yeah, we'd be a little concerned about infection, so we may use it for that. Or in my case, I've cut myself a lot with something that's not supposed to cut you, like cardboard. I used to work at Home Depot, so I was always cutting myself on things like tile and cardboard and just like the weirdest things, and those little plastic things that wrap around bundles of wood, and you know, and wood. I mean, I was just always cutting myself on that. And you just don't know what's on that stuff. You don't know. So you just want to use your oils for infection if you're not sure. And then frankincense is really good for scar prevention as well, especially if the cut is up here. And so we've actually had a lot of wounds on the face. If you can remember all the times I've shared, you know, what oils I've used on Lila, who's our 6-year-old, she has had So many cuts on the wound. I should have dragged her in here, but I don't know if she'd want that kind of attention right now because she's at that age now where she gets a cut and she's kind of like doesn't want anybody to know. So she slit her forehead this way. And when you slit your skin this way, and this is a time that you probably would want stitches if you care about what the scar is going to look like, because the wrinkles go this way. So when you cut yourself this way, it opens kind of like a little taco, just kind of opens like this. And so you need those stitches to bring it back together. Now that I have watched that process happen, she only had 3 stitches, I realized I could have treated that at home with some steri strips. I just needed to bring that tissue together and then use the oils to speed up the healing. So if you want to get stitches for something like that, by all means, go do it. There's not a whole lot of evidence that shows that essential oils and stitches are not a good idea. Stitches are not made out of the same plastic that your water bottles are made out of, okay? They're a totally different material. One of the things that I found was super helpful about the stitches and the essential oils is because one of the things they said to me, and just so you guys know, I hate wounds and I don't like anything to do with them. My mom still has the scars from her knee replacements, and I don't even like looking at those. But one thing they wanted me to do with Lila, with those little 3 stitches, there's a little tab. They said, you want to move it every once in a while. And I was like, what? I am not touching that. That was so, ugh. So anyways, I found that using the essential oils kept that area supple, so those stitches didn't get like into the skin as the skin was healing, so the skin didn't heal over them. So I was kind of glad I didn't have to go moving those around because I just didn't want anything to do with that. I know I'm a little weird on that, but so we were using, and I was just dropping the oils on there, and actually the oil I used was Immortelle. Immortelle is a blend that's kind of the anti-aging blend, but what it's really designed to do is help improve or bring proper hydration to the skin so that the skin heals better and faster, which is why it's so good for things like wrinkle reduction and that kind of stuff. So we use that a lot for wound care too, and it smells really nice. Okay, so then we have On Guard. So like I mentioned, it's infection. It's a very, very strong antibacterial. And again, there's a lot of studies that show that On Guard is very effective for things like MRSA and then staph. Okay, so I talked about that. Now, let me find a couple of recipes for you that I wrote down. Oh, another thing that you might come in handy. So we typically want to add an ointment, right? We think, oh, we have a cut and owie, let's add an ointment. So let me talk about ointments really quickly. And yes, I have used Neosporin a lot in the past. Now, one of the things we want to keep in mind with ointments is that they can trap bacteria, and we don't want that to happen. We want the body to do what it needs to do in the healing process. The reason why things like Neosporin help is because it keeps the skin supple. It keeps it so that that moisture is in there, which I just talked about Immortelle being that for you. Lavender does that. Even Melaleuca has a little bit of that in it. Other oils like rose can help with that skin if you've got some rose oil in the house. But our Correctex ointment, it is thinner than Neosporin, so it does the job of the healing without trapping that bacteria in. But even if it did trap the bacteria in, it has so many amazing, powerful essential oils in it that those oils are going to help the body and the good bacteria in the body fight the bad. So it's a very effective thing. Now, my girls have said, my girls have always used it on their wounds, but just recently when Lila did skin up her knees really bad, she said it burned really bad. So I actually skipped that one altogether and was just using the lavender and just keeping those more milder oils on her skin. Okay, so Correctex. Okay, so for children and infants, you can use Roman chamomile, although I still use lavender and Melaleuca. Cuts on the face. So Lila actually got a cut. She ran into a tree branch, and she got a cut right under the eye. Scar is still there, but it's very, very minimal. It's nice because it goes along with the wrinkle. I am a little concerned as she gets older and the skin starts to do its normal skin thing, that wrinkle will be more obvious. So we do use things like Immortelle and Rose on it, and now Yarrow Palm, which is a new oil that we started carrying last fall. because of how yarrow pom can be really effective for supporting the dermal layer specifically. But yeah, you can use Roman chamomile if you want. Okay, so let me just go through here. Oh, I didn't talk about surgical wounds. Surgical wounds, you can use a lot of these same oils. But what is actually recommended? So they mentioned something about peppermint and melaleuca. So peppermint's a vasodilator, and it helps blood vessels, like it opens them up, and so it lets the blood flow through, and healing process is going to happen a lot faster with surgical wounds because they're deeper, a lot deeper, and they cut muscle tissue if they're deep enough, depending on, I guess, what the surgery is. But what they recommend actually in this case is 3 drops of helichrysum, 3 drops of frankincense, 2 drops of lavender, 4 drops of lavender, to 2 teaspoons, or you can get a 10 ml bottle, a roll-on bottle, and then you fill it up, you fill it up with the fractionated coconut oil, and you can apply a few drops when changing bandages. Now, the other thing I want to point out is because essential oils move in and out of tissues, you can apply it around an area. So let's say you have a bandage on, you can't take it off, but you want to apply oils every hour to support the healing process. You can apply those oils around the bandage, and since your body is already going to town on that wound and starting to, support the healing process, the essential oils are just going to get carried to that location. So you don't have to put the oils right on the spot for them to be effective. You can put them close to the spot. And then that brings me to another point. Make sure you're drinking water. Your body needs water in order to regenerate. It's a very, very important thing. So if you are slow to heal, you get infections really easily, you're using your essential oils, drink your water. You're going to need that. Okay. I think I covered everything that I wanted to talk about. Let's see. Yeah, that's it. Just another reminder, if you try to put a Band-Aid over where you put essential oils, it's not going to stay on for very long, so just keep that in mind. Totally forgot that when my daughter had So she ran and fell and wiped out the entire side of her body, and including her little hip bone, like took the skin right off the top of that. So totally forgot and was putting oils on it and then stuck a Band-Aid on her and put her on her pants, and then before we knew, the Band-Aid was sliding off, and then her poor little owie was exposed. So just keep that in mind if you really do need a Band-Aid on a spot. So in that case, it would have been a better idea not to use my oils, get the Band-Aid on there so that her waistband didn't sit there and rub on the wound. So that way we can just put the oils around that spot. Okay, so Lori asked, can you use sandalwood since it doesn't burn on infants and toddlers? So remember, sandalwood, and actually let me read a little bit for you on sandalwood. So sandalwood is not going to be a replacement for things like lavender and melaleuca and frankincense, okay? So let me go to sandalwood really quick and we'll take a look at that one specifically. All right, we're almost there. Okay, so sandalwood is good for dry skin. So basically, and melaleuca does this actually more effectively. So when you have, when you get a wound and as it's healing, it gets itchy, and then you get the scab, and then it's dry and it starts to come off, and that gets really uncomfortable because it gets snagged on things. That's when you would use your sandalwood because it helps to soften all that stuff. The other oils, one thing I've noticed when you use lavender and melaleuca ongoing through the healing process, you don't have that itchy thing that goes on when it's starting to heal, as long as you're really good at remembering to reapply. You also don't have that when you use Correct-X, or if you just use fractionated coconut oil, because fractionated coconut oil has really small molecules and they get into those cells as well and do some really good work there. So I mean, you can't really go wrong if you have a tiny baby. I like to use frankincense and then a diluted lavender. So the lavender touch and then frankincense. When my son had his well, when he was a baby and he had his, well, the umbilical cord, you know, we were just putting the frankincense on that. Not that I was afraid to use the other ones, but that was just the one that I knew, because he's a baby. He can't talk to me. He can't tell me what he's feeling. So I just used that frankincense, because frankincense has hardly any sensation when you're using it. So you don't feel cold, hot, stingy, burning. Like, there's just no sensation. So that's why we use that one for really, really little babies. And you can use rose on little babies as well. Helichrysum is another one, because you don't really feel that one either. Hopefully, though, a little baby isn't going to get an owie. So there are instances like umbilical cords and circumcisions, and you know, if they have a surgical situation, then yeah, you would have a situation. But hopefully a little baby isn't riding a bike and skinning up his knees. But man, when they start walking and crawling, they get hurt a lot. So next week when we go over injury, I will talk about baby bruises and when kids fall down and hurt themselves. We'll talk about broken bones. We'll talk about sprained ankles and other things that might happen this summer. So if you have a specific thing that you're concerned about, you know, make sure that you let me know for next week, and I will cover it for you. So that's all I have for tonight. Thank you for joining me. And if you have any questions, you can drop them in the comments. If you have somebody that you think, wow, this would really be helpful for them because they have accident-prone people in their house, then make sure you tag them, because they can watch this replay at any time. It will be here. Okay? All right, guys, have a great night.